Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast. Powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. With Philip Nothard and Curtis Hutchinson, bringing you all the chatter that matters.
Well, Philip, we've got a packed podcast ahead of us today. Lots and lots happening in the industry. And you may detect a theme because a certain reference to the ZEV Mandate pretty much touches most stories today, but we'll get onto those soon. But I know you've had a busy week because you're at the VRA conference since last time we chatted.
Yeah, we had the a members meeting with the VRA. Very good turnout, in excess of 40, 50 people there at the event down at the Epix offices down in Meriden, just outside Birmingham, the NEC area there. But yeah, I mean, as you say, the topic of conversation was EV batteries in the remarketing sector and talking about their viability and repairability. And we had Ashley from the Boswell aftermarket, Ashley Viners, who talked about the situation within the insurance sector and the difference of batteries, EV insurance costs compared to ICE vehicles. David Gray from EV Battery Solutions there talking about repairability in the EV space of batteries, and then Cap HPI talking about the market used car values around EVs predominantly. So yeah, EV had a certain theme throughout that morning. But yeah, it was a great insightful event there.
Yeah, and talking about EVs, next week we've got the next supplier special in our sort of ongoing monthly series. We caught up with Generational, who are a startup that specialises in supplying electric vehicle battery health checks and certification services to car dealers. And we're actually in conversation with co-founder and CEO Oliver Philpott. Now, it's definitely worth catching that because it's an area of the whole EV debate that it's very important, but it doesn't get discussed that much. And Oliver goes into great detail about how this degradation is managed and how dealers can actually use it as a selling point by showing the life of EV batteries, especially on used vehicles.
Yeah, definitely. And I had actually by default, by coincidence, I bumped into Oliver at the VRA members meeting as well. So yeah, we got to chat to him for, as you say, the podcast supplier special next week. But yeah, I actually bumped into him. So it was great to face-to-face meet Oliver, or Ollie, as he likes to be called. But yeah, no, fantastic. So do listen to that when it hits your podcast feed next week. But this week we've also got the monthly Men Able moment with Stephen Whitton after the midway break. So stay tuned for that one. We won't do any spoilers yet on that one. You need to stay tuned for that one when you'll hear Stephen Whitton with his latest Men Able moment as well.
And also this week, we posted our latest catch-up with Steve Young. Now, Steve Young will be a familiar name to many listeners as the CEO of ICDP, the automotive consultancy. But as we've already touched on before, back in December, Steve's actually heading up Çağtaş Automotive, which is Turkey's biggest dealer group. They're launching into the UK with Auto West London, which is a Omoda and Jaecoo business. Now, it's actually opening in March, and I think work began on it in January. So we caught up with Steve on how that is progressing, the sort of challenges that he's facing as pretty much a poacher turned gamekeeper, which is a question we put to him. And here's a brief extract from that conversation. So, Steve, a fascinating turn of events, which means we have lots to talk about. Welcome back to the pod. Does this make you a poacher turned gamekeeper or gamekeeper turned poacher?
I wouldn't like to try and take a guess on that one, Kurt. I think
the jury's out.
All I would say is that as you said, my background is primarily in the sort of manufacturer world, if you go back. But the more years that I spend looking at distribution as a whole, then the more respect I have for dealers. So, maybe I'm going from the dark side to the. It depends on your perspective. I think the main point, the thing that I think people appreciate ICDP for is that it has a balanced perspective. That we work on the basis of the facts and we upset both sides equally. So now is the time to actually put into practice some of the things that I've been talking about for the last 14 years at ICDP.
Yeah, and it's probably worth making clear at this point that you do retain your role at ICDP in parallel with this new role with Jaecoo, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've got a good team at ICDP, and there might be occasions when I excuse myself from a particular discussion. That's normal in any professional services business where you're working with multiple clients. But for the most part, it's beneficial to everyone because to all of our members and our consulting clients, because you can sort of talk from theory, but it's always been much more effective to be able to talk with a mixture of theory and practical experience. And this is just an opportunity to reinforce both sides. It's a two-way flow. ICDP into Auto West London, as the UK business is called, and Auto West London back into ICDP.
Brilliant. Well, let's get into it a little bit then, Steve. I mean, for starters, let's think, talk for the listeners of, who the background, who are Jaecoo Automotive, and how big are they in Turkey and across Europe?
Well, they're the largest dealer group in Turkey. So there's one or two other businesses that have some manufacturing interests and so on, but Jaecoo is the largest pure retail group. The turnover is $1.5 billion last year. So they will be looking to be included or be on the edges of the next European Top 50 update that we do in ICDP. They work with, I think there are 16 brands now, including some of the newcomers, but also many of the established brands. And they have around 30 dealerships in Turkey. And the dealerships in Turkey generally tend to be, larger than those in continental Europe in particular.
And I mean, coming to the UK, what was the attraction for the group on the UK, and what growth potential do they see as a group launching here?
Well, I think all groups, all large groups, reach a point where the obvious opportunities at home, whatever home is, seem to be running out. They've already taken advantage of all the attractive options, and you start to look elsewhere for growth. And that was the situation that Jaecoo reached. The chief executive, my boss, went to university in London. He knows the UK well, comes here frequently, and it was a familiar territory. If they were going to move outside of Turkey, then this was a good place to come. And we see it with other investors as well, from Asia, from the States, also wanting to come into the UK market. So not that unusual a choice once you made the decision to move somewhere else.
You're listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors.
Headlines this week come from Motor Trade News, AM and Car Dealer. Starting with, strong used car market should bring cheer to dealers as the SMMT reports 5.5% rise in used car sales in 2024. Carmakers are on course to miss ZEV Mandate targets by 346,000 units by 2028, according to the latest forecast from Cox Automotive. Vertu battles margin squeeze as ZEV Mandate shakes car market and group warns of reduced full-year profits. Evans Halshaw confirms fresh wave of dealership closures as Lithia wields the axe once again, and Suzuki to cut UK dealer network as bosses blame impact of ZEV Mandate targets. So, as I said from at the outset, Phil, plenty on the ZEV Mandate this week.
It's got a bit of a running theme. Yes, it has.
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on the Motor Trade Radio podcast. If you're a supplier and would like us to profile your business and reach our audience of dealer bosses, managers and decision makers on one of our dedicated supplier specials episodes, get in touch with Curtis and Philip at motortraderadio@yahoo.com.
So, first headline is from Motor Trade News, and it's very much, I would say this is probably the most upbeat story of the week. And the headline there is strong used market should bring cheer to dealers. So, this is Motor Trade News's take on the SMMT's figures for the used car sales over the course of 2024. And the data shows the market grew by 5.5% to 7.6 million transactions, recording 8 successive quarters of continuous growth. So really good news here for the used car sector. It has recovered since the pandemic. We've seen year-on-year growth now, and throughout the year, over 400,000 more vehicles changed hands compared to 2023. And the piece goes on to say that's pretty much fueled by more availability of stock and wider choice, which has resulted in wider choice for buyers. But transactions rose in every month in 2024 as they did in 2023. And I'm just wondering how that ties in with your forecast for last year, Phil. 7.6 million units.
Yeah, I was fairly close. I think we were in about 98% of the final figure.
You'll take that.
I'll take that. I mean, the reality is, I think it was a strong final quarter of the year. I think it was stronger than many predicted. I think, reality, as you pointed out there, Curtis, this is the highest used car volume year since 2019. So since the pre-pandemic numbers here. So as Andrew Charman has commented there within the post, this is very positive news. 5.5% increase in volume there, and bear in mind, 2019 that you might class as a strong market was 7.9 million. So we're not that far off as returning to what you would call a normalized market. And I mean, just to put this in context, the average annual used transactional year between 2001 and 2019 is only 7.375 million. So we are 300,000 ahead of the pre-pandemic decade average. So it's a strong year for the sector, I think. And then what does that look like going out to 2025? I think it adds a little bit of optimism that we could sort of see a similar figure this year. Maybe a slow start, Q1, Q2, as stock is a little bit thin on the ground and there's some challenges facing, which we'll talk about later in terms of facing the dealer sector. But inevitably, we're back onto that 7.6 million used transactional market, which is a positive note for the sector.
Yeah, definitely. And you did touch on the final quarters, which was actually up by 4% to 1.7 million units. So the year really did end strongly. And it's worth just pointing out BEV sales, because they actually, this is a theme we return to on a regular basis, used EVs. sales of used EVs actually rose by over 57% to a record 188,000 units, to achieve their highest ever share of 2.5%. And that's actually 13 times larger than 2019. So we're starting to see the benefits of those defleeted EVs from the corporate sector coming into the used car market now and sort of generating a bit of a churn there.
Yeah. I mean, what is interesting, just because I know you like your top 10, and Andrew's put the SMMT top 10 in that list there, but Fiesta's still there at number 1 there, Curtis.
It is, yeah. Should we do the top 5?
Yeah, go on.
Okay, number 5, Mini, which sold 160,000 units. Number 4, Ford Focus. Number 3, Volkswagen Golf. Number 2, the Vauxhall Corsa. And as you say, number 1, Ford Fiesta with 306,207 units.
Still in demand, even though it's not being made anymore. Still there in demand, Curtis. Yeah, it is a classic. Yeah, future classic, not yet. But heading over to Car Dealer now, and this comes from research from myself and Reggie, the digital garage. This is that Carmakers on course to miss ZEV mandate targets by 346,000 units by 2028. And this is basically based on our Insight quarterly report that has been published this week, where we forecast both the new and used market for 2025 in terms of seasonal volumes, and then look at fuel type and volumes going out to 2028, so the next 4 years for the market, but actually thinking about what's happening more importantly with this around that fuel type marketplace and how that is starting to change, should we say, Curtis?
Yeah, definitely. And it is an interesting story. It's worth having a look at because it is fairly detailed, because it does actually quote some of the research. And the research found that 58% of drivers keen for manufacturers to share more information regarding comparative cost analysis. So identifying some of the causes for this lack of confidence in transitioning to EVs, while 46% of respondents said that longer warranties or service packages from manufacturers would help address their concerns. And elsewhere, 69% of drivers said they wouldn't be willing to pay more for an EV over a petrol or diesel alternative.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, we commissioned work with, as I said there, Reggie, Chris Green and the team over there, Reggie. I mean, we surveyed 2,700 in-car drivers, and it was really not necessarily directly with the ZEV mandate consultation that's in the market. We're trying to understand from a consumer's perspective, what do they want? What is going to help them in this transition to an electric vehicle? What are the barriers, rather than just the normal infrastructure and range anxiety, which we hear about a lot, but actually, what do they want to see from government? What do they want to see from dealers? This was really trying to get underneath those big headline sort of, range and charging infrastructure challenges, which we all know about, but actually, what do they want to see? So it was a fantastic survey and study to get some very useful insight from as we think about this transition to electrification.
And moving on to the next story, which is from AM Online, and the headline there is Vertu battles margin squeeze as ZEV mandate shakes car market. So, yeah, this is Vertu Motors, one of the biggest dealer groups in the UK, and one of the last remaining listed companies. So they published some trading update over the course of the week, which is incredibly detailed, and AM have focused very closely on it and certainly highlighted some of the main points within it. So the piece is saying that significant pressure on new and used car margins due to the ongoing impact of the ZEV mandate has forced Vertu to warn that full year pre-tax profits will be substantially below market expectations. And it goes on to explain that despite active cost reduction measures, and despite having outperformed market trends, certainly in EV sales and like-for-like retail volumes, Vertu said in the trading statement that its performance has been hit by record fleet sales, which have significantly impacted gross margins.
Yeah, and Robert does talk about there at the end of that bit that the UK automotive sector needs urgent support to return to the role of an economic growth driver, and he's not wrong with that. And he does talk about the used car market, just because we've just been talking about that previously, is that their used car operations perform better than new car sales with year-on-year profitability improvements. However, anticipated gross margin expansion was lower than expected due to subdued consumer confidence and the impact of the new car discount, which I know we talked about quite a bit last year, with those heavy discounts as the manufacturers were pushing to achieve that 20% mandate level in the market. So again, sort of Robert highlighting some of those positive results, but obviously highlighting some of those challenges and headwinds that the sector still faces.
Yeah, and within the piece, he does actually, or certainly within the trading statement, he does call upon the government and industry collaboration to address market distortions, saying that the UK automotive sector needs urgent support to return to its role as an economic growth driver, which I know from our conversations with Robert over the years is a sort of key theme for him. And within the piece, it does actually say that to offset some of these expenses that Vertu is facing, it's implemented some cost-cutting initiatives, which include reducing headcount, technology-driven productivity improvements, and also significantly closure of most retail operations on Sundays, as well as consolidation of all dealerships under the Vertu brand by April this year.
Yeah. So hopefully we are overdue a catch up with Robert on the podcast, and if you're anything like me and Curtis, we really do enjoy those chats with Robert. So hopefully we'll get to hear soon from Robert, have a catch up, a general, what's happening in the world of Vertu and his view on the market. But we'll be back with more headlines after this week's Men-Able Moments.
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on Motor Trade Radio, powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the biggest car retailing headlines from across the media, available on demand, wherever you are, and on your podcast feed. Next up is our latest Men-Able moment, looking at mental wealth and well-being awareness and best practice in the automotive sector. With me, Stephen Whitton. Yeah, hi everyone, it's Men-Able Moments time again. And this time I want to talk about self-care. I think it's very easy for us in a very busy environment to let our self-care take a bit of a back seat and actually think that self-care is selfish. Putting ourselves first and putting our health and well-being in front of other people's doesn't always sit naturally well for everyone. Now, I've been in this industry for 40 years this year. I know, I can't believe it myself. And one of the things that's really remained true is just how hectic and relentless and busy the industry has always been. I don't see it ever changing. I think we just all have to learn to adapt and just keep going as we always do. But a key bit in the heart of that is making sure that we take care of ourselves. So whether you're a technician or a sales exec or a manager or a leader or you own a business, the industry really is relentless and it's going to take a lot out of you. And burnout, stress and fatigue don't just affect your own well-being, they impact productivity, customer interactions and ultimately the bottom line. And what we see often is that a tired, overworked team can't deliver peak performance, no matter how skilled or dedicated they are. So why does self-care matter? Well, better performance, we've touched on that. and stronger team dynamics. If you get the team together, get them all taking care of each other and looking out for each other, it fosters a much more positive work environment and greater morale. That can only lead to great customer experiences, from happy, energized employees creating better experiences for customers that lead to higher satisfaction and loyalty. And longer term, it's career stability for all of us. Our career in the industry is a marathon, and taking time to take care of ourselves really ensures that we are in the best place to have longevity in that field without sacrificing our health and happiness. So a few things that I do to prioritize my self-care. I take lots of short breaks, intentional breaks during the day, really do recharge the mind and the body, whether it's popping out to make a cup of tea or going for a short walk, going to the shop, quick walk around the car park, whatever it might be. Short breaks during the day really do work. I've also started to learn how to set boundaries and be okay with saying no, and also being okay and having the freedom to make a choice and to live with the consequences of that. And avoid taking those calls and checking emails when off duty. That's something that I'm guilty of doing because I properly don't switch off really doing what I do. I just seem to be permanently on duty. So setting boundaries is really important. Note to self. Staying active, of course, we've touched on that many times before. Light exercise, having a little wander, going for a walk. All of that stuff really does get your energy levels up. And you don't need me to tell you about the right proper nutrition and hydration during the course of the day. And the final one is about finding some way of creating some mindfulness. So whether that's reading or watching a film or going for a walk, as I've said, or indulging in some hobby that properly distracts you and keeps your mind focused on that one thing. All of those count as mindfulness, as well as the obvious of going to find some quiet place and relaxing. And all of that really does help to put your self-care at the forefront. Now, for leaders and managers, lead by example. We've talked about being a role model before, and if you're doing all of the above yourself and looking out for the signs of burnout and promoting a balanced work life, then you'll not only be supporting the individuals, but it will lead to a stronger and more effective workforce. So finally, we know our industry is fast-paced and running on empty doesn't help anyone. So self-care isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. And when we all take care of ourselves, we bring our best versions of ourselves to the team, to our customers, and to the business. And you can't take care of anyone else or the business if you don't take care of yourself first. So my final thought on all of that is self-care isn't selfish. Look after yourselves, and especially as we approach the next very busy period for those of you that are engaged in the whole March rush and all the rest of it, look after yourself and look out for the people around you. I want to give a quick shout out to our friends over at Motors who are sponsoring us again this year. So thank you so much for that. And if you head over to their dealer website, you will see a page that's dedicated to Menable, where you can find some articles and links to videos where you can get more on all of these subjects. So in the meantime, have a fab weekend. You know how to get hold of me. It's stephen.whitton@menable.org, and I will speak to you again soon. Take care. Bye for now.
Well, some very interesting points there from Steve, and hopefully you picked up on some of that self-care and taking a little bit of time out and things like that. So, hopefully, as I say, it resonates with a lot of you listening today, and just to think about that, when you can say no, you don't have to do everything all of the time. Some good points there made by Steve.
Yeah, definitely take lots of breaks and go and walk the dog, or as Steve does, just wander around the car park, go to the local shop, just get out there and have a little break.
Yeah, and as I said last time, if there's anything you want Steve to talk about, particularly in men-able moments, then please do drop Steve or Curtis and I a note, and we'll certainly look at that. And in Ian Godboll's top tips, again, don't hesitate to send us a note if there's something that you want us to raise and talk about. But back to the headlines and back over to Car Dealer, and this is that Evans Halshaw confirms fresh wave of dealership closures as Lithia wields the axe once again. That's a headline-grabbing title, if ever I've heard one, Curtis.
Well, yeah, getting wields the axe into a headline, it's...
Yes, wields the axe, yes.
Yes.
So further cuts coming to Evans Halshaw UK dealer network, and this is that 6 sites are being closed by American owner Lithia, including 3 direct pod option locations. Vauxhall dealers in Portsmouth and Wolverhampton, joined by Renault and Dacia showroom in Doncaster, and that the firm confirms sale of Vauxhall Edinburgh site to Arnold Clark. So a lot going on there within the Lithia business.
Yeah, and it's a good story from Car Dealer. They had a tip off, and they were sent the full list of closures by a source inside the group, and they got the group to confirm the news when they approached them. So at this stage, it's not known how many jobs, if any, will be affected as a result of this restructuring. But Car Dealer did actually speak to someone at Evans Halshaw, who said the closure of these stores aligns with our wider strategic network plans in conjunction with our OEM and network partners. And we've spoken about this before, Phil.
Yeah.
It's whenever you have a dealer group making a significant acquisition, which Lithia did when it acquired Pendragon, there's bound to be some form of shakeouts, that they will be looking at representation by brand, by geographical location, and I think that's what we're seeing more and more from Lithia. And this follows on from the closure of the car shop used car supermarket brand last year, which resulted in a number of job losses and a series of smaller closures in terms of individual sites over the last 12 months.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, we've talked about this a couple of times, that this, alongside the headwinds within the broader economic climate, along with as we talk about those OEMs in terms of looking at who their strategic partners are going to be, this is inevitable, as you say there, back to such a sizable acquisition there. It does follow at some point with that strategic geographic review of what they've got, who they've got in terms of those brand partners, etc. So this isn't a shock in many ways, but I think it was expected. But I think positively there has been some takeovers. I mean, obviously the one there cited that Arnold Clarks have taken on one of the operations. So it brings opportunities for other operators, doesn't it, to take either the sites on or at least the open points for those manufacturers in certain areas when things like this do happen.
Yeah, and takes us on to the final story for this week from Car Dealer, and the headline there is Suzuki to slash UK dealer network as bosses blame impact of ZEV mandate targets. So back to the ZEV mandate, and again, Car Dealer had a well-informed tip-off here of Suzuki's plans, and within the story, again, Suzuki has confirmed that this is happening. So the gist of the story is that Suzuki is trimming the size of its UK dealer network, with UK bosses pointing the finger of blame at the impact of the ZEV mandate. So Car Dealer has learnt that the brand is to close around 30 sites across the country, taking its network from 129 outlets to around 100, and affected dealers were made aware of the decision throughout January, with new UK boss David Cately personally calling every dealer who will be impacted. And it goes on to say that the vast majority of those sites to be cut have been offered the chance to stay on as licensed or authorized repair centers for Suzuki.
Yeah, and I mean it's good, isn't it? I mean, obviously, you know, we've caught up with Dale White along many times on the podcast over the years, and you know their relationship with the dealers just pointed out there that, you know, picking the phone up to each of them individually and offering them potential alternatives. That's the way they work into it. I mean, what a fantastic relationship they have with their dealer network, and it's just unfortunate that it's come to this in terms of, you know, the challenges that the manufacturer and the sector faces at the minute, that they've had to resort to this as an outcome. But again, you know, inevitable that these things do happen, and there is points here within the story that Suzuki recently launched their first UK EV, which is the e-Vitara, and pointed out that having only just avoided the ZEV Mandate fines last year due to what is highlighted as flexibilities within the regulation. So again, you know, there's things going on in the wider sector that's influencing some of the decisions by these OEMs. So we wish anybody affected by this all the best with it, and hopefully that there'll be good outcomes from the end of all of this.
Yeah, no, I think the you know, one of the keys to this particular story is pretty much what you outlined there, Phil, about Suzuki is only recently going over to total EV vehicles, having certainly rolled out a number of mild hybrids and been very successful with mild hybrids. But the spokesperson for Suzuki says that as Suzuki approaches a new era later this year with the introduction of the first electric-powered model to its range, as well as implementation of the ZEV Mandate regulation, a representation revision of its new car dealer network size was deemed necessary for the future. So this is Suzuki very much looking towards the future and how it operates as it transitions to an EV brand.
Yeah, and just finally, before we finish, there's a couple of movers and shakers and appointments this week that are also friends of the podcast. And the first one you'll know when we had Elliot Perks on from Jigcar, who's the owner of Jigcar. They've made an appointment this week and appointed James Griffin, who's been named Transport Director at Jigcar, and he's a former Kazoo exec, and he's going to be also joining the new chairman, Simon Bottomley. So a couple of new appointments there at Jigcar. So again, commenting here from Elliot that you know that it's great to have obviously new appointments there and showing the future, and that James Griffin has a deep domain expertise that our dealer customers can lean on when transforming their transport model at their group level. So again, great appointment there for Jigcar. And the other one is when we had, if you remember, we had Victor Zhang on, didn't we, Curtis, from Omoda and Jaecoo. Well, they've made a new appointment. So there is a new appointment there that new UK boss for Jaecoo and Omoda, as Gary Lan, is named CEO of the Chinese brands there. So they've announced that, and he'll work alongside Victor Zhang, who you'll know from the podcast interview we had there, who's the country director for the UK. And Gary will oversee the UK operation and help to build the brands across the European market there. So two significant appointments to two operations there that are friends and been on the podcast there, Curtis, haven't they?
Yeah.
And just to finally, don't forget to have a listen to the full interview, as I said there right at the start, with Steve Young. You'll find it absolutely fascinating. And as the King drives by when we're recording there with Steve, so have a listen to that. That'll be in your podcast feed. And do look out for the upcoming interview there with Oliver Philpott from Generational, who on the next Supplier Special this week.
But you know what, Phil? That's all for now. So many thanks for joining us on the Motor Trade Radio podcast. Until next week, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Thank you for listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. We'll be sharing all the URLs from this week's headlines on Monday morning. To make sure you receive them, just subscribe to the free newsletter on our LinkedIn page. Just search Motor Trade Radio Podcast.